determination about their status. And just to slightly push back on Mark, even if you tell me that, and you prove that they're gang members, I'm not so sure that I'm okay with them being sent off to be tortured in a foreign country, but I'll leave that aside.
Several days later.
Breaking news, the Supreme Court has just paused the midnight deadline to return a Maryland man who was mistakenly deported to El Salvador. A lower court ordered the Trump administration to bring Kilmar Abrego Garcia, a Salvadorian national, back to the United States by 11:59 p.m. tonight.
We're getting some breaking news at this hour coming out of the Supreme Court. The U.S. Supreme Court has handed President Trump a victory, letting him and his administration use the 1798 law that historically has been employed only in wartime to swiftly deport alleged Venezuelan gang members as part of the Republican president's hardline approach to immigration, granting that administration request to lift the Washington-based U.S. judge James Boasberg's March 15th order that had temporarily blocked the summary deportations under the Alien Enemies Act while litigation in the case continues. So the Supreme Court has weighed in.
Boy, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy. I gotta tell you guys, the Democrats and the mainstream liberal media, they're about to be so upset with the latest decision from the Supreme Court, which is a huge W for the Trump administration, as they have allowed the Trump administration to resume deportations under the Alien Enemies Act. It was a 5-4 decision with Amy Coney Barrett once again siding with the liberal justices, okay? And she's showing us that she is, in fact, a turncoat, okay? She's a product of Mitch McConnell. She was a DEI pick. She should not have been picked. President Trump definitely made a mistake with her. But, you know, hey, what can you do at this point? But normal, everyday people are celebrating this because it means that the Trump administration has less hoops to jump through in order to enforce immigration law, to deport gang members, okay, people who shouldn't be in the country in the first place, okay, regardless of whether or not they are actually in gangs, don't matter. They are in the United States of America illegally, so therefore they are subject to deportation. But the left, because they become super radical, they have been essentially boohoo whining and crying about these illegal immigrants and the gang members being deported, and they've been demanding that they come back, right? Demanding that gang members be let back into the country. This is how radical the modern Democrat Party is.
But Judge Boasberg told him that if you've got the means to unlawfully deport someone, you find the means to bring them back. Left rogue judge. The problem is he was appointed to the bench first by President Bush.
Yeah, so the Democrats in their desperate attempt to bring back illegal immigrant gang members, alleged gang members, has failed, at least for now. Okay, they were boohoo-whining, crying, saying that he was deported in error, even though he wasn't deported in error, right? It's just that in the past, a immigration judge had ruled that he can't be deported back to El Salvador because presumably he is a member of a gang, and a rival gang in El Salvador would do him harm, right, if he goes back to El Salvador, which is why they rule that, okay? However, the fact that he was deported, again, it's not the controversy, it's just that he was sent back to his home country. The way the mainstream liberal media tries to frame this issue is if, well, Trump deported this man on accident, right? Like he was here legally. No, he was not here legally. He was rightfully deported, and he got sent back to his home country. I'm not sure exactly what the controversy is. He was here illegally and he went home.
Well, we begin here at 4 with some breaking news. In just the past 15 minutes, Supreme Court Chief Justice John Roberts temporarily pausing a judge's order that required a deported Maryland man to be returned to the U.S. by tonight. It means for now, Kilmar Abrego Garcia will not be coming back to the United States.
So this is part of the major developments in the case Fox 5 has stayed ahead of from the very start.
Let's get to Chief Legal Correspondent Katie Barlow live outside the Supreme Court with the latest details. Katie?
Hey, good evening, ladies. As you said, just about 15 minutes ago, Chief Justice John Roberts issued what's called an administrative stay. It's a temporary pause that kind of freezes everything in place and stays or pauses Judge Paula Zinnis's order that would have required Kilmar Abrego Garcia to be returned to the United States by midnight tonight. This comes as the Department of Justice asked the Supreme Court to step in here and put that pause order in place. Now, the chief got this request because he's actually in charge of requests that come up from the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals, overseeing cases out of Maryland. And basically what happens now is he will refer the matter to the full court for consideration. And they seem to be interested in moving quickly here, sensitive to the timeline, because the Chief Justice called for a response by 5 o'clock tomorrow. But it turns out Abrego Garcia's legal team didn't need that long, because just minutes ago, they filed their response to the Department of Justice saying that this order should be allowed to go forward and that Abrego Garcia should be returned by midnight tonight in their filing. They called this a case one of one. This is a one-off, essentially, where the government admitted a mistake in deporting Abrego Garcia to his home country of El Salvador when there was an order from an immigration judge saying specifically that he cannot be deported to El Salvador. So right now, that means the full court will consider both sides' responses, and now we will see how long it takes the court, now that they have heard from both sides, to make this decision. Typically, in this case, when you hear from both sides, the government, who makes the initial request, they get a little while to issue what's called a surreply. Basically, they get to come back with their arguments one more time before the court decides. And so there's likely some conversations going on right now about how quickly that can happen, and then the court will likely issue their decision. But again, this is just a temporary pause. This is not the justice saying how he thinks about the issue. This just preserves the status quo for now while the justices consider what and how to do it next.
And of course, MSNBC was boo-wadding and crying, right? Liberals cry racism over the fact that President Trump is not required for now to return the illegal immigrant alleged gang member back to this country.
I don't know what it's going to take for the American people, for 78 million Americans, to deal with what motivated them to make the choice to elect this man again, to make the choice that will allow these people to undermine every fundamental assumption we have, that you can just be disappeared, and then they can argue that, a court is getting in the way of their ability to exercise, foreign policy in some ways, right? I don't know what it's going to take for 78 million Americans to deal with what motivated them to make this choice. And the choice that they've made, we have to just be honest, is to literally throw the Republic into the trash bin. And this is just one example. The tariffs is another, right? They made the choice. Now, what was behind it? We have to grapple with it, because it's the snake, it's the beast coiled up in the heart, the bosom of the country, as Frederick Douglass said. And the fact that they are doubling down on this shows you what kind of human beings they actually are.
Say more.
We chose a felon who is more interested in loyalty, who's more interested in retribution, who's more interested in grift than in democracy. And we chose a felon because we didn't want to elect a black woman. So to read that, to actually explicate that, is to say we would rather destroy the Republic than for that to have happened. And until we grapple with it, there's no amount of protesting I could do. There's no amount of resistance that could come into play to actually force 78 million people to grapple with what motivated them to put themselves in this position.
And I think you're getting at how we're going to have to go through the next 4 years, right? Because I haven't on this show covered the talk of a third term, because I believe it's a shiny object. I believe the things driving Trump's approval rating down are the man-made destruction of the economy, abandoning due process. But you're right in that 78 million people voted for someone who wants to shred the Constitution. Why?
That's the key.
What's the answer?
There is a sense in which the underbelly of the country, what Melville was writing about, right? That there's this sense, this tragic dimension of the American project, where the extension of basic democratic principles, the idea that dignity and standing should be accorded to anyone, no matter their gender, no matter where they're from, no matter their color, that has been challenged because some people believe that by definition they ought to be superior to others, and that the country should be organized in such a way to ensure that fact. And we have been willing to do monstrous things in defense of it. Monstrous things. And people have been using it in some ways, Nicole, for their own self-interest. They might not be monsters in that sense, but they might be unabashedly greedy. They just want to make money with and exploit people's grievances and hatreds in the way. But we've been dealing with this from the very beginning.
I love these liberal tears. I really do. Okay. They're crying over illegal immigrant gang members. Okay. These people, they make me sick. They really do. Okay. They really think that we should give due process to people who did not come into the country with due process. They didn't follow the rules to come into the country, right? They broke the rules, okay? So at the end of the day, we got to do what we got to do to remove these people, right? You let 10 to 20 million people into the country illegally, and you think we're going to follow the rules to remove them? They weren't following the rules to get in. So again, we got to follow the rules to remove them. Then again, that makes it so our operation is never going to be effective, right? We can't conduct mass deportations following the rules, right? Because, again, the Biden administration didn't follow the rules, letting them into the country in the first place. Again, that's what these people don't understand. That's why nobody cares about their whole, the illegal immigrant gang member deserves due process, right? And then they make up this, sad sob story. This guy was an upstanding illegal immigrant gang member, right? He had a wife and some kids, right? This is what they'll do, right? But nobody cares. He was here illegally. He's from El Salvador. He's home, right? He's home. That's El Salvador's problem. He's not our problem, okay? It's not our problem. So that being said, let's react to the big ruling of the day, which is that President Trump can resume the mass deportations under the Alien Enemies Act.
The Supreme Court has paused a lower court order requiring the Trump administration to return a wrongly deported Maryland man by midnight tonight. The government admits they shouldn't have sent the man to a notorious prison in El Salvador. And moments ago, it handed down that 5-4 decision allowing Trump to resume Alien Enemies Act deportations. Our Devin Dwyer covers the court for us. So, Devin, just break this down, what it all means.
Some significant news from the court tonight, Lindsay, in a 5-4 decision, as you said, allowing the president to resume deportations of alleged Venezuelan gang members under the Alien Enemies Act. That's that wartime act from 1798 that was last used during World War II to inter Japanese Americans. Remember, this was the law that the president used to send 2 plane loads of alleged gang members to El Salvador a couple weeks ago. Many of those members on those planes, Lindsay, received no due process. They didn't have a chance to challenge their detention, much less their removal. Many of them said they weren't even gang members. Most of them did not have criminal records.
None of that matters. They're here illegally, right? They're here illegally. It does not matter, okay? That's what these people don't understand. I don't care if their record is squeaky clean. They came into the country illegally. I don't understand what the liberal media does not understand about that, right? But they keep playing up this, they weren't really gang members. They didn't commit any crime. I don't care, right? They're here illegally, so therefore they are subject to deportation, right? This is a message to anybody in the country illegally. This is what could happen to you, right? So don't try to come. It's really that simple.
They challenged in federal district court in Washington the illegality of this. Of course, Judge Boasberg, the district judge who's overseeing that case, has been a target of President Trump and other allies, putting that restraining order on those flights, halting them temporarily. And a short time ago, Lindsay, the Supreme Court, now overruling Judge Boasberg, says basically that those challengers brought their challenge in the wrong courthouse. This was a decision based largely on jurisdiction rather than substance. It was 5-4. The 4 dissenting justices were the 3 liberal justices and conservative justice Amy Coney Barrett. But what this means in practice, Lindsay, is that the Trump administration can now use this Wartime Act to expedite removals of Venezuelans. That said, the Supreme Court, interestingly, did plant a flag for due process. While the court sided with President Trump, they made clear that anyone detained and put on an airplane to El Salvador has to first be given notice, and second, has to be given a reasonable amount of time. That's the court's words, to challenge their removal to another country before they can be sent south. So that is sort of a bit of a hedge on Trump's power here. But make no mistake, this is a significant win for the president, and one that is being lamented tonight by the conservative justices. Justice Sotomayor, in a dissent, said that the government's conduct in this case, sending those airplanes south with those migrants a couple weeks ago with no due process, she calls it an extraordinary threat to the rule of law. And she says the Supreme Court tonight has violated the best traditions of this country, and that is why the court so narrowly divided in that dissent in this case, Lindsay.
Devin, before we let you go, let's talk about Kilmar Abrego Garcia, the Maryland man who was wrongly deported to El Salvador.
Again, wrongly deported to El Salvador, but not wrongly deported. He was rightfully deported. But again, the controversy is that he was deported to El Salvador, not that he was deported. Again, the mainstream liberal media and their framing on this stuff, it's sad, it really is, because when you actually know what's going on, you can see right through the propaganda, okay, and how they frame stuff in a way that is clearly anti-Trump, right? This is not neutral at all.
What does this mean for him?
Well, it means that he will remain there now for the time being with this administrative stay in this case. Now, we should say, as you said at the top, that the Supreme Court has not yet taken a position on whether or not the government needs to bring him back. But the fact is that any delay, if he is wrongly, being held there, is significant to him and his family, and certainly an affront to the rule of law. The government, in this case, does not contest the facts. It was a mistake that this man from El Salvador, who, was out freely, approved by a court in the United States, was swept up recently and sent south, that was all a mistake. But the real question now, Lindsay, is what is the government going to do about it? The Trump administration has not offered an answer to the court. The court put a deadline for tonight. The Supreme Court said maybe that was too aggressive. They hit pause. And so they're going to try to decide what they're going to do in this case. I expect some action from the Supreme Court later this week. But in the meantime, that gentleman, Mr. Garcia, is still in El Salvador, a place, by the way, Lindsay, that a federal judge said he should not be sent because of fear of persecution because of who he is.
Well, you know what they should do? You know what they should do? If the courts ultimately rule that he has to be brought back, what they should do is that they should just deport him to some other country, right? Deport him to some other country. Okay, they don't need to bring him back because, again, he can be deported, it's just not to El Salvador, right? But again, if they insist that he must be brought back, okay, you know what? We're gonna bring him back and we're gonna deport him right back again to another country and go from there to make the point. Because these people don't understand. We're not playing around when it comes to these illegal immigrants, right? We don't want to hear your sad sob stories. We don't want to hear how they need due process, bruh. The Biden administration, they broke every rule in the book when it comes to the law letting these people in. And you think that we're supposed to just follow the law to the T in order to deport them to get it out? No, that's not how it works. That's not how it works. And they're going to figure that out the hard way. They can keep boohoo, whining, crying all they want, but I just don't think it's a good look to be begging for illegal immigrant gang members to come back to the country. I just don't think that this is going to work out well for the Democrat Party. But hey, this is where we're at. Let me know what you guys think. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Most importantly, share a Black conservative perspective. Peace.